Hello, everybody, and welcome to MLA Format and In-Text Citation, where we are going to take the latest 2016 update of the Modern Language Association expectations on formatting and in-text citation and apply them to our paper using concrete examples from Bartholomew, Davis, Irvin, and Straub. Part 1, Where Things Go and Why, Formatting. In MLA, we use 1-inch margins everywhere. Top, bottom, left, right. The only exception to this margin is the header and footer, which are set to 1/2 inch. The only thing that goes in either of those places is your page number and running head, which we'll talk about a little later. So for right now, I'll show you how to do that in Microsoft Word. All right, so if you have Microsoft Word on a PC, it would look very much like what you see here in this image. The first item under the Layouts tab is Margins up in the left-hand corner. All you have to do is click on Margins, and you should see the default setting is Normal, which is 1 inch everywhere. This is the default for pretty much every version of Office since 2003. So unless you have a really old version, this is what your default should be. All text in a MLA paper should be what's called Align Text Flush Left. This is easy. So basically, pretty much all text you'll see is exactly 1 inch from that left margin. Now, on the other side, it's fragmented and broken, and that's how it's supposed to be. There are 3 exceptions to this left text alignment. The first is new paragraphs, which are indented. This is not a business letter. This is an essay. We indent. Titles, such as the first title on the first page and the works cited title on the works cited page, are centered. And the last item is page numbers, which are oddly enough aligned right. More on that soon. So under the Home tab, your paragraph alignment should be set to the default Align Left. Students sometimes pick that fourth option, which is Justify, to make it look like a book. Don't do that. It looks weird on a paper like this. This is the default setting. If it's being weird at all, merely push Control-L and it will push everything to the left. Here's the part where students end up making mistakes most times. Unless your professor says otherwise, always double space everything. Let me say that again. Always exactly double space everything. In previous versions of MLA, there were some things that were single spaced, such as works cited entries, headings, block quotes. But under current MLA, and to be honest with you, current APA, everything is always double spaced. Now, most students are smart enough to go and find the ability to turn this to the 2.0 double spacing, such as I have from the drop-down menu. Which is good, because Microsoft defaults to a bizarre 1.15 spacing. The catch is, Microsoft Word also defaults to add space after paragraph. And this is something most students seem to forget, or ignore, or just don't realize in the first place. So from the Home button, click the Spacing button, which is an arrow shooting up and an arrow shooting down. And from here, click on the number 2.0. That'll double space it. And then the very bottom, click on it one more time. Notice the Remove Space After Paragraph. Do not forget to remove space after paragraph. Page numbers in MLA. They are in the upper right corner. They're in the header, 1/2 inch from the top. They're flush with the right margin. They go on every page, including the works cited page. This example here, this Laura Josephson piece, is directly from the MLA handbook. So yes, I know this is exactly how it's supposed to be because it's actually literally in the book. So put page numbers on every page. We do that really easily. Under the Insert tab, click on Page Numbers. From the first drop-down menu, you'll see the very first entry is top of the page. And then from the second drop-down menu, we're going to click on plain number 3. This will insert page numbers in the upper right corner where they belong. please do not try to manually create page numbers. It looks bad, it's awkward. Just let the computer do it. The computer's good at it. Now, before you leave, the cursor should be right in front of that first page number 1. And here we're going to insert what's called the running head. And we want to put in MLA your last name. Our last name is our running head in MLA. So in my case, I'm going to type the word SYN, S-Y-N, put a space, and I'm done. I've got my page numbers, and every single page will have my last name and page number from here on out. All right, so we talked about the header. Now we're moving on to the heading. Unless your professor says otherwise, do not create a title page. There is no rules for making a title page in MLA. If your teacher insists upon it, I recommend Chicago. Chicago is basically the big brother of MLA, and most advice that Chicago offers ports pretty well over into its younger brother, MLA. That said, in MLA, we have what's called a heading, which does not go in the header. The heading goes on page 1, and it has 4 elements: your name, my name, the course, and the date. It needs your name because, of course, you want credit for your hard work. It wants my name because there are times where you will turn in a paper physically and not have the ability to hand it in to your teacher face-to-face, and there is an entire stack of papers at CU Denver's English department in a manila envelope of student papers which never got graded because they never got to the teacher they were supposed to. So make sure your teacher's name is in the second space. Third one, the course. Why do we need the course? Guess what? Your teacher teaches a lot of classes, and it's nice to know when he is grading or she is grading this paper that he or she can find out you from which class compared to the other 3, 4, or 5 he or she may be teaching. The last one's the date. I like the date that it's actually due, but the date is fine. So take a moment, go ahead and click back into your document, type your name, type my name, type the course number, English 1310, and the date. All right, now let's talk about titles. Rules for titles. Do double space and center your title beneath the date. Do capitalize all these words in a title: the first word, the last word, and all principal words. Do not, under any circumstance, italicize, underline, or put in quotation marks any part of your title unless your title specifically mentions another title. I will show you an example of that in a few slides, so just bear with me. But for now, don't italicize or quote any part of your title, and don't ever underline anything. We're not using typewriters. Do not put a period at the end of your title. It's not a sentence. It is a title. It's a phrase or a series of words. Do not capitalize any of these words unless they're the first or last words. Articles. Articles are a, an, and the. They are the weird adjectives in English that denote specificity and uniqueness. We're not going to capitalize them. Do not capitalize prepositions. Prepositions are relationship words. On, below, near. Those kind of with words, the 2 words that we do not need to capitalize in this space. Do not capitalize your coordinating conjunctions. That's the fanboys. The conjunction, junction, what's your function? Do not capitalize those. However, we do capitalize conjunctive adverbs like however, and thus, and furthermore, moreover, etc. Do not capitalize the to in infinitive, but to be honest, before I go into tirade on the infinitives, to is a preposition, so just don't capitalize to. T-O. All right, let's actually make a title. On where you're at, right beneath the date, push return, and then center. You can go on the Home tab and click the Center button. Alternatively, you can press Control-E. Now that your cursor is centered, write your title following the rules we just discussed. Here is an example of an MLA sample paper in MLA style from the MLA Handbook. Samantha Baldwin's classic work. Marriage is a dubious goal in Mansfield Park. Notice her name, professor's name, the course, the date, her page number with her running head, which is her name. And then notice the title. The title has a title in it. Mansfield Park is a book by Jane Austen, so Mansfield Park is italicized where the rest of the work is not. We are going to move on to works cited, and then we'll actually get into the in-text citation you see on this page. Works cited list. Works cited is a new page. It is double-spaced throughout, as is everything else in this document. The title, works cited, is centered 1 inch from the top. Each entry is flush left, but subsequent entries are indented 1/2 inch. It's an anti-paragraph, and I'll show you how to make a hanging indentation in a moment. And you're going to alphabetize it by author's last name. So let's create our works cited page. So since your cursor is centered anyways after making your title, go ahead and click on the Layouts tab, and then click Breaks, and then click on Page. Alternatively, you could just press Control Return or Control Enter, and that should kick you to the center of page 2. Here at the center of page 2, I want you to type the words works cited. It is not citation, it is not bibliography, it is not references. In MLA, it is called a works cited because these are the works you're actually going to be citing in your piece. Now click Home and align text left, which is Control L. We are going to get out the assignment sheet, and we're going to begin typing up the works cited entries from the assignment sheet for Bartholomew, Davis, Irvin, and Straub. Alternatively, you of course can just click this link here, or the one from the schedule, or the one from Blackboard, and you could download the assignment sheet, and as it says in the assignment sheet, copy and paste these to the works cited page. You'll notice don't have that hanging indentation yet. It's just sort of slapped in there. So we're going to go ahead and change that. We're going to highlight all of our works cited entries, and we're going to right-click over the highlighted area. You'll get a pop-up menu. I want you to click on Paragraph. You're going to get a new menu, and then under Indentation, I want you to click on the None in Parentheses drop-down menu, and there's a word called Hanging. Click on that, click OK. And now you have a works cited list with your hanging indentation for this assignment. I imagine many of you are asking, do I really need all these entries when I'm only looking at 2 or 3 of them? No. Feel free, if you're not looking at Bartholomew, go ahead and cut him out. If you're looking only at Straub and Irvin, go ahead and cut out Bartholomew and Davis. Whatever you reference in this piece needs to be on this works cited page, which is why in your assignment there won't be any sources you got other than Bartholomew, Davis, Straub, and Irvin. If you decided, for reasons I'll never understand, to get some quote from Mark Twain and put it as your hook, you're going to have to cite this, and you're going to have to cite it here. How much easier would it be if you just find a quote from Davis, Bartholomew, Straub, or Irvin to use instead? Anything that you reference in your paper at all needs to be cited. So don't go outside, don't go to the internet, simply just keep it focused on these 4 readings, or 3 readings, or 2 readings, at least 2 readings of your choice. Let's move on to citations. So this is where we give credit where credit's due. Because like I said, every single thing you reference in your paper has to be on your works cited, but we're going to talk about citing in text right now. Quick blurb on paraphrasing your quotes. Take a look at this. Paraphrasing is interesting because you're actually interpreting in your own language. It's useful. In this class, I'm looking for direct quotations though. I want you to give me exactly what Davis says, exactly what Straub says, because it captures exact language, it supports your points. In many ways, it's memorable, it's unusual, it's well-crafted, striking. I want that for this class. Just directly quote it. Next semester, if you take 1410 with me, we'll get into paraphrasing, because paraphrasing is incredibly important in academia. But for now, quote everything. We're in the United States, therefore, we're going to always place periods and commas inside quotation marks. The Hollow Men doesn't have a comma there, but because the sentence "modern poems are a pleasure to read" created a comma there when we had the dependent clause, it got pulled in. The only exception to this rule is when talking about the parenthetical citation. So the quote, "His soul had approached the region where dwell the vast hosts of the dead." It had a period after dead originally. However, because the citation that we're about to talk about is part of the sentence, the period got pulled out of the quotations and got put after the parentheses because the parentheses has to be before the period. In-text citation. Anytime you reference outside material, it's got to be cited. Always, 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 otherwise it's plagiarism. Must provide a citation for any information that is not your own. Citations are in parentheses. They're after quotes or paraphrases, but they're before punctuation. Inside the parentheses, you have to have author's last name, and page references. If you mention the author in your sentence, the only thing that appears in the parentheses would be the page numbers themselves. Let me show you some examples of these. So here we have in-text citation, where I'm going to mention our friend David Bartholomew. David Bartholomew explained, a writer does not write, and this is Bart's famous paradox, but is himself written by the languages available to him. I mentioned Bartholomew in my sentence, so all I need in the parentheses, all I need in the citation is the page number to find this information. So let's say you want to write Richard Straub's insight that always be ready to expect more from the writer on page 289 of the text. I want you to try to introduce this quote by directly attributing it to Straub. Mention the author in your own sentence, and don't forget where the page number needs to go. Got it done? All right, here's the answer. Straub explains, always be ready to expect more from the writer. So I used Straub in my own sentence. I passed the mic to him. He then said his quote, and then I gave the page number where one could find this information out. Straub explains, quote, page 289. Contrast that with this author's name and reference. By having an active role in which papers they wish to write, students were more inclined to work on an assignment earlier and not wanting to wait until the last possible moment. We almost always wrote our essays the night before they were due, usually getting going after midnight, and swore to and at ourselves the whole time we would never again put off a paper to the last minute. Tobin, page 1. I don't mention Tobin in my sentence. Rather, I want to focus on his idea. And then I want to use my idea to introduce his idea, but I don't want to talk about him yet. But I still have to give credit where it's due, so since I didn't mention him in my sentence, I have to mention him in the parentheses before the page number. I want you to try the same thing with Bartholomew. Bartholomew says that students must learn to speak our language, and this is on page 45. Don't mention Bartholomew directly, but focus on his idea. Introduce the idea that students need to speak our language. Don't forget to mention the author in the parenthetic, though. And never, ever, ever drop a quote into a paper without first introducing it. We always have to pass the mic off. It's our paper. We can't randomly have another voice pop into this paper. Otherwise, it sounds very awkward. Always hand it off to Bartholomew or Bartholomew's idea. So to succeed in academia, a student must communicate like a professor. He must learn to speak our language. Bartholomew 45. So here we go. My idea introduces his idea, but I still have to give him credit. So there you go. This comes up a bit. Sometimes we want to reference somebody who's referencing somebody else, and we just don't have the ability, especially in this class where I'm telling you only reference the materials in the book themselves, that you can't find this excerpt. So I'm talking about this guy, Peter Elbow. And Peter Elbow is as seminal to why I do what I do as David Bartholomew is, to be honest with you. So I'm referencing Elbow, but I don't have a Peter Elbow on my works cited page. Instead, I'm referencing his quote from Lad Tobin. Let me show you how this is done. I would advocate that these responses are free writes as Peter Elbow suggests. Write nonstop without worrying about correctness, form, logic, etc. Play with words and ideas. Form writing groups. Rely less first on doubting, more on believing, less on criticism, more on imagination. Quoted in Tobin, pages 2 and 3. So, I know this information is interesting, but I'm telling my reader, don't look for Elbow on the works cited page. There's not a Peter Elbow reference. Instead, go to Lad Tobin, and on page 2 and 3, you're going to find him quoting Peter Elbow here. Let's try one. So, Professor Leanne Carroll says what are usually called writing assignments in college might be more accurately called literacy tasks. Now, there is no Leanne Carroll that we read, but she's quoted in Irvin on page 142. So I want you to mention Carroll in this quote directly in your own sentence. And then I want you to create a works cited page where the parentheses references it to Irvin, quoted in Irvin. Got it? All right, let's compare answers. Carroll highlights, comma, quotations, what are usually called writing assignments in college might be more accurately called literacy tasks. Quoted in Irvin, 142, period. Since this class is going to consist of 4 5 to 6 page essays, You will never, ever, ever have any reason ever to put a block quote in this paper. There is no reason to ever fill more than 4 lines of a quote in anything in this class. It really is just a grotesque amount of padding, and it screams this out. But let's say you have this monstrous quote from Davis. So you have this enormous quote. He relied solely on his readings of papers that students wrote in order to describe 3 contexts in which students shared: the rhetorical, the students sensed their audience and their purpose for writing; the intellectual or epistemic, how the students struggled to understand the ideas they were studying; and the disciplinary or formalistic, how the students used language to show membership in the discourse community. From page 81. That's a big sentence. What are you going to do with it? What could you do with it? Because you will never, ever, ever block anything in this class, ever. The first option is called an ellipses. You could actually hack out the parts that aren't very important. So remember all those weird parenthetic definitions? Well, let me just cut them out. Davis writes, he relied solely on the readings of papers that students wrote in order to describe 3 contexts in which students changed: the rhetorical, the intellectual or epistemic, and the disciplinary or formalistic. The 3 periods here are an ellipses, and I'm telling my audience there's something that's been cut out, but it's not important for the context of the sentence. And the sentence is still completely grammatically correct. You could go up and say this to somebody and they'd be like, oh, okay, gotcha. Option 2, paraphrase. Paraphrases, no matter how long they are, paraphrase, as long as it's your words, your unique words, you're fine, regardless of length. So check out me taking his information in, and I'm going to translate it through my filter, and I'm going to express the same idea, but through the way I understand it. Following Stephen North, Davis explains that there are fundamentally 3 contexts of student writing. First, the rhetorical, where students focus on the audience and the purpose of the writing. Second, the intellectual, where students wrestle with the central concepts underlying the course. And third, the disciplinary, where the students secure membership in their major as a discourse community through the application of disciplinary preferred knowledge. That's me. That is totally the way I talk and the way I write. But it's still encapsulating what Davis is saying. It's my paraphrase. However, notice that even though it's my wording, I still got to give Davis the credit for it. All right, taking a few minutes to wrap it up and make sure we're all on the same page. If you need any resources, please check out the MLA Handbook for Writers of Research Papers. It has a ton of great advice. Alternatively, since this is an online class, why don't you just Google MLA and see what the first thing is that comes up? Most likely, it's Purdue OWL. OWL is the greatest website for writers everywhere. Please go check them out. They have a great explanation of what's going on in MLA. Questions, comments, concerns, as always, shoot me an email, give me a call, come by my office in Columbine 1026, or tweet at me. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your papers, and I figured the fact that I helped set up this one, everyone is going to nail item 7 on the rubric, MLA citation. Thanks. See you next time.